Don't film this. Don't film this.
We all remember back in 2016 when Edward Holloway, also known as Eddie Hall, deadlifted half a ton in front of a massive audience at the World Deadlift Championships in Leeds. He almost ended up in the hospital, and how he broke the world record by a total of 37 kilos in just one night. First outdoing his own world record by 2 kilos, then taking the massive jump straight to 500, becoming the first man in history to deadlift half a ton under a competition standard. Now, since then we have had a few powerlifters actually perform a half-ton deadlift out of competition, and with a sumo deadlift strapped setup, which actually isn't allowed in any competition, since strongman doesn't allow sumo and powerlifting doesn't allow straps. And of course, in 2020, Hafthor Bjornsson pulled 501 during the P-word in his own gym, which technically was a sanctioned competition, and verification of the lift was actually done in an orderly fashion. However, due to the circumstances and the fact that only a few people were actually allowed to be in close proximity to each other, many have since called this lift fake, or at least unofficial, as it wasn't part of a bigger competition with more competitors allowed.
Mate, okay. Who weighed the plates?
What the f are you? I'm not answering questions.
Who weighed the plates? Your dad. World record. Not allowed.
I personally think it counts, and regardless of who weighed the plates, they were definitely not fake by any means, considering how much he's actually lifted in other competitions.
Nice.
However, that doesn't change the fact that only 2 people have ever completed a half-ton deadlift in a competition setting. And 3 more, as far as I know, have done so without any competition rule set. But considering how many people have actually trained exclusively for the deadlift in order to pull half a ton, like Ivan Makarov, Rauno Heinla, and even Brian Shaw at one point, how the hell has only one other man in the last 8 years been able to replicate this tremendous lift? Well, because it's difficult. Very difficult. In fact, I would argue it's more difficult than finding a Greg Doucette video without a testosterone promotion getting whacked in your face with a hint of brain rot. However, there is a lot more to this, and there are reasons why so many successful strongmen and powerlifters still fail to come even remotely close to the most famous lifting record of all time. But before we head into that, a quick installment from today's video sponsor who helped me make videos like these available for you guys. Fume again wanted to sponsor one of my videos, and I am forever thankful. Basically, Fume serves as a healthier alternative to vaping, so for those of you who just happen to be addicted to flavored air, Fume is a non-dangerous alternative where you also don't pull anything into your lungs. They come in a ton of different flavors, so you will definitely find something you can make a swap towards. And being completely free from nicotine and vapor, it is a great alternative for those struggling to make healthier habits. They're also third-party tested, so you can be certain that their products are actually safe to consume. But the most neat thing about Fume is how you can always take it with you on the go, so you don't fall back on your addictions. So if this matches you in any way, then head over to their website and try out Fume today. And if you order the Journey Pack and use my code BACKGUY, you will get a free Fume topper to improve the experience. So check out tryfume.com/BACKGUY, or you can use the QR code on your screen right now to get started. But for now, back to the video. Now, if we look at some official deadlift personal bests in today's strength scene, there are quite a few lifters who have actually surpassed the 1,000 pound mark in competition. In raw powerlifting, this is more rare and usually reserved for sumo deadlifts pulled on a deadlift bar like Danny Grigsby or Jamal Browner. But in strongman, where lifters are allowed to use straps and a deadlift suit, there are quite a few guys around the 450 to 475 kilo mark, like Ivan Makarov, Benny Magnusson, Mitchell Hooper, and even old-time equipped powerlifter Andy Bolton, who was actually the first man to ever pull over 1,000 pounds in competition ever. However, despite how many people have actually gotten in this range, if you look at the end of this graph, 2 lifters are way ahead of the rest. Of course, being Eddie Hall and Hafthor Bjornsson, who have also both won the World's Strongest Man at some point in their career, and they even hate each other so much that they actually entered Ultra Instinct to beat each other up. But why is this gap so massive? Well, there are a couple of reasons for this. One is that whenever there is a competition with athletes at this level, the jumps always seem to go straight from the 450 to 470 range and straight to 500, or in recent times 505 kilos. Which means that many of these guys' best competition results weren't actually close to their actual maxes. Now, Eddie's 500 was definitely a full-fledged max deadlift. He got everything out of that rep and he definitely got his best lifting competition. But if you look at somebody like Jerry Pritchett, his 465 wasn't close to maximal. Benedict Magnusson pulled 465 too, with some kilos left in the tank. Mitchell Hooper would also probably get 10 to 15 kilos more on his deadlift if he had the opportunity. And the same can probably be said for Ivan Makarov, who only ever pulled 475 in competition, but has recorded lifts much closer to the half ton. Like in the summer of 2023, he pulled 490 kilos in training, but failed to get the world record in competition. Getting pretty darn close, but actually getting stuck at the knees as per usual. So in a sense, this massive gap is actually much narrower in reality. But because competitions are laid out in a way that doesn't allow for a lot of variation between attempts, many have sub-maximal results that makes it seem like they're much further away from the half-ton mark than they really are. But that is not the only reason. Eddie and Hafthor were not only essentially built for deadlifting, having decently long arms and being very technically efficient, but they were also incredibly massive, with Eddie peaking at close to 200 kilos or 440 pounds body weight, and Hafthor came in even bigger at 209 kilos or 460 pounds, which definitely puts these guys in a league of their own in terms of size, and Peak Hafthor was arguably the largest strongman in history. Aside from our glorious Lord and Savior, of course, Ivan Makarov only weighs around 150 kilos or 330 pounds, and the same goes for Hooper, and deadlift world champion Rauno Heinla is even lighter than that. The only guys on this list who came even remotely close is Brian Shaw, who weighed almost the same as Thor. But he was never really a prime deadlifter, he was more of an all-rounder and never really dedicated most of his training specifically to break a deadlift world record like these other guys. So because their total body mass was so massive, Eddie and Thor definitely packed on a lot more muscle than their competitors, which helped them produce more force and perform better in so-called static events like the deadlift. Eddie, for example, was never really good at events that required moving, but he was incredibly efficient in deadlifts, squats, and presses. Now, the reason why these other guys can still come somewhat close despite being so much lighter is due to having better technique in relation to their muscle size.
It's not about how hard you can go, it's about the technique.
Which comes down to neural adaptations, which basically means that the brain helps their motor units, which are nerve cells and innervated muscle fibers, create more force more efficiently, and somebody like Mitchell Hooper probably has better leverages for the deadlift than Eddie and Thor. For example, if you compare Brian Shaw to Hooper, he's able to pull much more efficiently because of his lower body mass and better leverages, despite being outweighed by over 100 pounds. There's also the fact that after Eddie and Hafthor spent their years focusing exclusively on the deadlift, the hype train for the half ton just started to run dry. There might not be as much of an incentive for guys today to dedicate their lives to deadlifting 502 or even 505. Eddie broke the barrier that seemed to be unbreakable, and Hafthor did 501 to prove that it could be replicated. But afterwards, like, okay, who's gonna be the third guy to replicate a world record by a small margin? It simply doesn't hold as much of an impact, even though the deadlift is still probably the most famous and talked about strength world record. Also, strongman as a sport in the last couple of years, especially in the World's Strongest Man competition, has definitely been dominated by lighter and more movable physiques. Now, Tom Stoltman isn't a small guy by any means, but he definitely moves a lot better than guys like Eddie and Brian Shaw, for example. And guys like Hooper, Novikov, Felicis, etc. are all giving up over 100 pounds of body weight to these giants in order to be more competitive overall. But it also causes them to struggle just a bit more on maximal lifts like the squats and deadlifts. So in order to actually see somebody pass the 500 kilo mark once again, I think whoever decides to do it will have to be either extremely technically efficient, somebody like Mitchell Hooper, or somebody who is already pretty big and isn't as tall, somebody with a similar build to Eddie Hall like Graham Hicks. Although an absolute giant could also come in and swoop the record like Pavlo Nakonechny, or somebody could just come from nothing with insane genetics and not only swoop the record, but also take it further, maybe even to the 520s in the near future. Personally, I think the most likely man aside from Hafthor himself is Mitchell Hooper, considering how far up he managed to get with 505 and the fact that he still has a long way to progress up in weight. So if he simply focuses all of his efforts on deadlifting, I think he could get 505 within the year, given that he also managed manage to stay injury-free. But if you look at powerlifting competitions in the untested federations, somebody like Jamal Browner could actually get a half-ton deadlift in competition as well. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments if the 505 deadlift will actually get broken this year, and who do you believe is the closest guy to getting it under a certain competition rule set right now, either in powerlifting or in strongman. Thanks again to Fume for sponsoring the channel, and I will see you all next time.